Years ago, when I was the president of the only two historically Black colleges for women in our country, Spelman and Bennett, being with HBCU students always gave me a sense of being in the future. Indeed, you all represent the best of what's to come. You are my future. You are our people's future. But over the next few minutes, I want to actually talk about the past. I want to talk about the past and why having a command of history, and I like to say her story, is of extreme importance to your well-being, to my well-being, to the well-being of all of us. Indeed, understanding what happened in the past can often help us to separate today's facts from today's fiction. And no matter what age you are, there is no way that any of us can be responsible Black women and men if we don't know the difference between what is fact and what is fiction. Here's one of many examples of why you and I need to know what happened in the past, because that knowledge will help us separate fact from fiction, help us understand where we are right now, and inform our actions as responsible adults. The passage of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States was said to grant the right to vote to Black men. And all women were said to have gained the right to vote with the passage of the 19th Amendment. But even a cursory study of American history will show us that indeed white supremacists responded to those amendments and kept Black people from voting by concocting requirements such as poll taxes and literacy tests. And they also kept us from voting through the use of racial terror, including lynching Black people. Understanding voter suppression in the past helps us to understand today's version of Black voter suppression. And it clearly exposes the long-standing and intimate connection between the illegitimate use of state authority and the ongoing presence of systemic racism. Here's one more example. Today, in some circles of Black men, one hears this: Black women are advancing and getting ahead at the expense of Black men. But in African American history and her story, we see overwhelming evidence that this has never been true, and it is not true today. The enslavement of our people that began 401 years ago involved forms of brutality that did not spare Black women from working in the fields alongside of Black men. And it did not protect Black women from being routinely raped by those who were called their white masters. I want to share with you what some so-called masters did. The historical record says that some some slave owners figured out how to have an overseer whip a Black woman's back with a lash while protecting the baby she was carrying that would grow up to be yet, if she was lucky, she would grow up, but she would be yet another enslaved person. A hole would be dug in the ground and a Black woman's stomach would be placed in that hole to protect the so-called master's future property while the overseer whipped that Black woman's back. The long history of Black women's double jeopardy, being victims of systemic racism and systemic sexism, continues. Just one expression of that double jeopardy is reflected in this fact. Today, Black women are paid just 62 cents for every dollar paid to white men. And Black women's wages and salaries are persistently below those of all other groups: white men, white women, and Black men. Today, while there are only 4 Black men who are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, there's not a single Black woman who holds that position. History is full of examples of the oppression of Black women and Black men. A knowledge of those historical practices, and there are so many of them, should help us clearly understand that efforts to pit Black women and men against each other continues, but it must stop. Ignorance of what happened in the past can prevent us from dealing with today's version of that same effort to divide and conquer. And so, my young sisters and brothers, what is the point that I am making? Quite simply, that knowing our history and her story is ever so important if we are to separate fact from fiction and to truly understand the world that we live in. All of which must take place if we are to have a better future. All that I have said is captured in this African-American saying: you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you have been.
So when a student leaves this university and says that they are Cheney made, they are academically prepared, they have the character that is going to be necessary to survive in life, and they have a social conscience that is needed in today's world. So they will be a complete individual when they leave Cheney, and they'll be able to say they were Cheney made.
Cheney made means to me actually accomplishing all your goals, because I believe if you can make it at Cheney, you can make it anywhere.
Cheney made means to me, no matter what trials and tribulations you go through in life, you'll be able to bounce back like a wolf. See you.
Cheney made to me means continuously evolving into your best authentic self in a setting that requires your contributions to serve communities both on and off campus. See you.
Cheney made to me means that you've allowed this historic university to be a part of you, that you are proud of who you are and where you come from. And luckily, I come from the first HBCU. See you!
Thank you to the National Council of Negro Women for letting me join Adulting 101. This program is one more example of your continued commitment to empowering Black women in education and entrepreneurship, and to your president, Dr. Janetta B. Cole. I also want to say thank you to all the young people who are demonstrating their interest in civic engagement by joining us. You are the ones who will build the next generation of change and opportunity, who will turn protest into progress. Gen Y and Gen Z together have the power to use your voices and your votes to address the triple threats of this healthcare catastrophe, our economic crisis, and the racial reckoning that is long overdue. As a member of Generation X, I know that we need your collective influence in the streets, at the ballot box, and in the 2020 census. This year, millennials and Gen Z combined have more electoral power than any other generation. Your generation's leveraged the right to protest by bringing attention to the wrenching pain of systemic injustice that has persisted in part because we didn't have the political numbers to fight back. When I saw the effects of the Rodney King decision in 1992, our only tools were landlines, video cameras, and protest. But you have learned to harness technology to not only reveal the inequities, you have turned them into tools for transformation. Your generations have fostered connections across a nation where COVID-19 has disproportionately harmed the most vulnerable. You are innovative in an economic crisis that endangers the livelihoods of working families. You are driving yourselves to be better than this moment, greater than its challenges, and the architects of our needed solutions. When we combine your traits of perseverance and resilience, we witness an alchemy that brings a new reality. But the analog solutions, like voting or filling out the census, can seem to be inadequate solutions for all of the challenges we face. Poverty, police brutality, food insecurity, climate injustice, inadequate healthcare, the list goes on. But what's different is you. What is different are the choices you can make because there are enough of you to make a difference. Yes, we vote to elect leaders. And because the other guys have the biggest numbers, their goals have won. But voting in a democracy is not an event. It is a process, one where the side with the highest number and the greatest stamina wins, where our generations, your generation, can finally win. You can vote for the leaders who determine funding for our schools, who decide the state of our criminal justice system. Voting means we have the chance to elect district attorneys and attorneys general that will protect Black lives. America is a republic that relies on representative democracy to choose who guides our government. For the vast majority of us then, voting is the one lever we have, the ability to pull in setting the future of our nation. So we have to be honest about how much work this requires. Across America, your generations can finally say enough. You can refuse to be discouraged by the permanence of inequality and the persistence of voter suppression. Don't give them the opportunity. Show them what happens when they try to silence your voice by voting. While the right to vote is fundamental to our freedom, the 2020 decennial census is also critical. Voting elects the people, but the census fuels their power. That's why I launched Fair Count, an organization to ensure a fair and accurate count in the 2020 census in Georgia and across the nation. Under Dr. Cole's leadership, NC&W has been an incredible partner in ensuring that Black women, children, families are accurately counted in the census through Sisters for the Census. For many of you, this year was your first time filling out the census, and your answers will help shape your future. The census impacts the spending of nearly $1.5 trillion a year. This money goes to critical services like healthcare and education. For example, how much money is available for Pell Grants comes from the census. Whether kids get adequate funding for school lunches is based on the census. It's also how the federal government decides how to allocate transit grants or fix roads and bridges. Funding for alternatives to policing are paid for by the census. But if the count in our community is wrong, we don't get the money. Think about it like a party. If you RSVP, you get the full spread and you get to see the live performer. But those who fail to get counted get the stale chips and have to hang out in the garage if you get anything at all. The census will determine how many seats in Congress your state gets, but it also determines who gets to run for office and who picks the winner. Imagine there are two rooms, one with people who face the same challenges you do and want more opportunity, or one with people who created your challenges and want you to stay exactly where you are. Legislative districts are like those rooms. When we get districts that put us with people who share our hopes and dreams, we can then elect representatives who fight for us. But if we get put into legislative districts drawn to separate us from one another, that's the process known as gerrymandering, then we're at the mercy of those who can drown us out and worse, shut us out. The census decides how these districts get drawn. And yes, they're called legislative districts, but that's for Congress, but it also counts for the state legislature that determines prison sentences or whether a state gets Medicaid expansion and access to healthcare. It applies to the city council and the county commission, how those districts are drawn, which is how local politicians determine which neighborhood is zoned for a grocery store or a bank and which one gets more liquor stores and landfills. And school districts that spend money on more classrooms for some and fewer books for others, all of these rooms, all of these districts are decided once every 10 years based on the census. But with 10 minutes, you have the opportunity to better your community for a decade simply by being counted. Because if you don't get counted, I promise you won't like the room they choose for you and your family and your community. In 2020, though, COVID-19 has made the census even more critical. Folks who've been hit hardest by the pandemic are typically the hardest to count in the census. I'm talking about people of color, immigrants, renters, and other groups that have been historically marginalized or disadvantaged. Now, because of attempts to rig the census to fail, these populations may lose out on COVID recovery funds for medical bills, business loans, or unemployment. Though they tried to end the census early, we fought back and we have until October 31st to get as many of our families, friends, and community members to complete the census. Let's beat their tricks and treat ourselves by getting counted. Voting and filling out the census are actions that bring us closer to equity and equality. They are the first steps in a long and complex process that can be tedious but is vital. Voting won't save us, but it will certainly do us harm if we are silent. So my challenge to all of you is to use your voice and your capacity for change by making certain that you vote and making certain that you get counted. Because when you count, we all count. So let's get it done.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being part of Adulting 101. Now I think we have a few poll questions we'd like to ask you. Are we ready for the poll? Just a few questions to see what's on your mind tonight. Are these the poll questions or are these the true and false questions? I enjoyed the messages from Dr. Cole and from Stacey Abrams. They are so brilliant. Okay, here we are. We've got the news source poll. Thank you. What is your go-to source for entertainment? Books, cable TV, Netflix, YouTube, or other? You can select your answer. There are 5 questions in the poll. It won't take very long. What's our next question? Where do you mostly get news from? TV, magazines, newspaper, or the internet? Now, these are not trick questions because there is no perfect source for news or information. Next question, have you ever been involved with student government? Been an active member of a club or organization where you held office? Have you ever volunteered or worked for a political campaign? Or have you volunteered for a charitable cause? Are you registered to vote? Yes or no? And then we have one final question, and that is, do you plan to vote in the 2020 general election between now and November the 3rd? We'll be back to discuss the poll results a little bit later, but thank you for taking the poll tonight. I want to pause just a minute to give our technicians an opportunity to verify that people have been given an opportunity to vote on the poll questions, and we will talk about the results. And now we'll go on with the show. We've got a little bit more to show you tonight before we wrap up. There's Dr. Bradley. Hello, Dr. Bradley from Wilberforce. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm well, thank you. I have truly enjoyed myself thus far. Good evening. My name is Dr. Tasha Bradley, and I bring you greetings from Wilberforce University in Wilberforce, Ohio. On behalf of our president, Alfred Anthony Pinkard, our faculty, staff, and magnificent students, we are excited to join you as part of this endeavor, Adulting 101, Fact or Fiction. Wilberforce is the nation's oldest HBCU owned and operated by African Americans. Founded in 1856 as a space of freedom and resistance for persons of African descent. We have a long history of social justice activism. Today, we continue our social justice focus by being committed to providing educational access to high potential students and remaining an affordable private university. Our mission includes creating the world's next social change agents, activists, and justice seekers. To this end, we invite you to join us, our student body in particular, as they go to the polls on November the 3rd. Wilberforce University is the first and the future. Thank you. Suo Marte.
Birth, restoration, and revival describes the new era taking place at Wilberforce University. It supports the groundwork to the university's framing imperatives of excellence, innovation, and kindness. The experience is becoming our legacy, remembering our sacrifice and operating at a level of excellence. At Wilberforce, whether you are a student, staff, faculty, alumni, family member, or friend, you have the leverage and freedom to be transformed into a leader. One thing our Wu family does well is persevere and rise to confront opportunity, and we unite to rebuild at our university. We call everyone to continue the legacy at Wilberforce. When me becomes we, less becomes more. Suo Marte.
We are Wilberforce! We are Wilberforce! We are Wilberforce! We are Wilberforce!
If you spend any time online, you know that there's no shortage of chain emails and viral social media claims about politics. And almost none of them are true. Often, the message itself includes major red flags that should alert readers that the author is not to be trusted. Here are just a few of what we'll call key characteristics of bogusness. The author is anonymous. Practically all emails we see fall into this category, and anytime an author is unnamed, the public should be skeptical. If the story were true, why would the author not put his or her name on it? The author is supposedly a famous person. Of course, emails that are attributed to legitimate people turn out to be false as well. We've even found that some oft-quoted words attributed to Abraham Lincoln were not his words at all. There's a reference to a legitimate source that completely contradicts the information in the email. Some emails will implore readers to check out the claims, even providing a link to a respected source. We're not sure why some people don't click on the link, but we implore you to do so. Go ahead, take the challenge. See if the information you find actually backs up the email. FactCheck.org has examined multiple emails in which the backup material clearly debunks the email itself. The bottom line here is, the folks peddling these claims don't think you'll bother to investigate them any further, or even click the link. The message is riddled with spelling errors. Ask yourself, why should you trust an author who is not only anonymous, but who also can't even be bothered to use spell check? The author just loves using exclamation points. If the author had a truthful point to make, he or she wouldn't need to put 2, 3, even 5 exclamation points after every other sentence. In fact, we're developing another theory here. The more exclamation points used in an email, the less true it actually is. Ditto for excessive use of capital letters. The message argues that it is not false. Be skeptical of any message that insists, "This is not a hoax." What's that famous line from Hamlet? "Methinks this chain email doth protest too much." Close enough. There's math involved. Check it. Some of these messages urge the reader, saying, "You do the math." So, do the math. It'll likely be wrong. So when someone shares a political chain email or viral social media post, check the facts. Hey, it can be fun. And if you don't feel like checking the facts, there's always the delete key. And factcheck.org. Definitely go to factcheck.org.
So false information can be found all over the internet, and the video we just watched briefly showed us how to spot those claims. Now it is time to see if you all will be able to spot those claims. So take some time to analyze this email, and then you all will have 30 seconds to vote and decide whether the claim is true or false. So pay attention. Tech team, if you could go back to the email for a second, just so they could have some time to look at the email. You could take the poll down. I'm not. Okay, please activate the poll. Okay, make sure you pay attention to question 1. Is the email about the order true or false? And just try to pay attention to what you remember from the email. All right, we can move on to the second graphic. If we could move on to the second, thank you. Now take some time to analyze this CBS News website and try to decide whether it is true or false. Take a few minutes for you all to analyze. All right, tech team, if you could activate the poll. So pay attention to question number 2. Is this CBS website a fact or a fiction? All right, now let's move on to the last graphic, please. The images. Now pay attention to this USA Today website story. And then you will have 30 seconds to decide whether this story/website is true or false. All right, if you could activate the poll for me, please. Thank you, and pay attention to question 3. Is this USA Today news story a fact or a fiction? Thank you. And Tech Team, are we able to show the results? Is this email about the order true or false? Well, it was actually false because if you paid attention to the email, or in the video, they mentioned how to pay attention to grammar and spelling. And in that email, there was a lot of grammar issues. I'm sorry. Now, number 2 is the CBS website, fact or fiction. Exactly, it was false. They had .co, which made it invalid, and the logo wasn't even there. And is this USA Today news story a fact or fiction? And it was true, and the website was also valid as well, based on research and the URL. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you, Kayla, for going through that with us. Now we've got the results of the poll that you took earlier. Let's see if I can pull them up. And the first question was, what is your go-to source for entertainment? And it's a multiple choice question. Books, cable TV, Netflix, YouTube, IG, and Twitter, or other. Books got 27% of you said that your go-to source for entertainment is actually books. Television got, cable TV got 48% of you saying that was your go-to source. Now, when we get to Netflix, YouTube, IG, and Twitter, 61% say that's where they get their entertainment from. And other was only 6%. Let's go on to the next question, and we'll talk about these a little bit more. The second question was, where do you mostly get news from? Predictably, 61% say they get their news from television. Magazines, only 6%. That old print is pretty much out of style, I guess. Same thing with newspapers, only 24%. And the internet, a whopping 79% of you say that's where you get your news from. I would like to make just one quick point about that. Magazines may have 50, 75, 100 pages. Newspapers may have 30, 40 pages. Television gives you maybe a minute or two of each story, and then they're on to the next story. The internet is limitless, and it sends information at you at the speed of light. Which one do you think has the most in-depth, detailed, fact-based information? Is it old-fashioned magazines and newspapers? Could it be them? There are no right or wrong answers to this test. The third question is, have you ever been involved with student government? 30% say yes, they've been involved with the student government. 79% say they've been a member of an organization. 33% of you say that you've worked for a political campaign. And a whopping 82% say that you volunteered for a charitable cause. That is all very commendable. And then our final question, the fourth question, are you registered to vote? 97% say yes, yay. So I need you to go out and tell somebody. Do you have a plan to vote in the 2020 general election? 97% of you say. And I just want to leave you with 4 quick tips for how to protect yourself from fake news on the internet or anywhere. Actively seek out multiple credible sources. Newspapers and magazines may be old-fashioned and get ink on your hands, but they are credible sources in many instances, along with books. The point is, there's no perfect source. Mix them up. There's nothing wrong with YouTube and Twitter, but don't make that your sole diet no more than you would make popcorn and potato chips your sole diet. Ask yourself who the author is of the online content and why they posted it. Before you take it in and believe it, ask yourself a couple of questions. Who, what, when, where, why was this posted? Avoid being manipulated by divisive or dishonest content. You know, we all like those likes and shares and retweets, but often it is the most controversial, the most outlandish material that attracts those likes. And so you have to be careful. Is this just to get you to click like or to share, or is this something that you can rely on? And then if you see something that is untrue or divisive on social media, you be the truth teller. If you see something that is true, without getting into an argument, without calling people names, you can point out when you see something that is not quite accurate. In addition to multiple news sources, I would encourage you to seek out multiple experiences, like being part of an organization, volunteering for a campaign. Collect experiences like Dr. Cole was talking about that enrich your own sense of what is true and what is false. Once again, thank you for being part of Adulting 101.
And as a part of our responsibility as citizens, it is advocacy. It is not just voting. It is so much further beyond voting. But what we do have to understand, y'all, just as my shirt says, we have to take the first step. We have to go to the polls. We have to register. We have to request our ballots. We have to drop off our ballots to ensure that our voices and our votes are heard. As we have this conversation tonight about the importance of civic participation, about the ways in which we show up, not just for our communities, you all, but also for ourselves. It is one of the most important responsibilities we have as adults, as soon as we turn 18, understanding the importance of registering and participating at every single level, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We talk a lot about the different things that get in our way of voting. One of those is voter suppression. We talk about it so much, and I know a lot of you may be just as frustrated as hearing about it as you hear things about, well, you have to vote because your ancestors died for your right to vote, which is true, but for whatever reason, we have some folks among us in our community who get frustrated by that and they don't want to hear it. It's still the truth and it still has to be said, and there are still people around us who don't know that. So we have to make sure they're informed about that. Now, as it relates to voter suppression, we talk about it a lot, and for some people, it's just such a difficult concept to grasp until it hits you. And that's what's had to happen in so many instances to really get us to understand. Not on a partisan level. I'm not going to make it partisan as much as I would like to, because I think it is true that there is one party over another that benefits from voter suppression. We know that there's been legislation passed in Congress. There was H.R. 1. There's now what is called the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It's the thing that the Supreme Court required of us to do after the Shelby versus Holder decision. But there's one party that stands in the way of that. And no matter what, y'all, voting rights should never be a partisan issue. It just shouldn't be so. It is a moral thing. It is a fundamental right for Americans. The bottom line is we have to understand that voter suppression is one of those things where it makes it more challenging for you to vote. And so the first thing you should ask yourself is, why is that? Why are people trying to ensure that some of us have a challenging time? When you think about some of your colleagues on other college campuses where they have literally divided that college campus, what are they so afraid of? University of Georgia just said yesterday they're not going to have voting on their campus. I know that's not an HBCU, but we still have some folks there who look like us attending that institution. Why would they make it more difficult for students on a college campus in the middle of not one but two pandemics to vote? I think it's very clear. You have the power. You just have to recognize you have that power. So the problem is, as we think about all of the varying things that our communities faces, whether it's whether it is the legalization of marijuana, whether it is college affordability, and how we ensure that the doors of some of our greatest institutions, many of them associated with Dr. Cole and others here today, they have the resources they need to keep their doors open and to ensure the students thrive both in the school and when they matriculate. or whether we're talking about mass incarceration or criminal justice reform, all of these things that we know overwhelmingly and disproportionately hit us, why would we not step up to ensure that someone who has our best interests and that those interests are aligned with us are put in office? Or maybe it's a ballot initiative. One way or the other, we need to ensure our voices are heard. And our goal tonight is to do just that. We want to ensure that you understand that bridge, that very important bridge between public policy and our legislators who we elect to shape and inform that public policy, to ensure it aligns with our demands, to ensure it aligns with our priorities, to ensure, again, that our votes are seen and our voices are heard. Right now, as it comes to voter participation, civic participation among young people under 25, right now less than 20% of young people under 25 actually vote. That cannot be the case. This year has to be the year where we make history. I can't say we, you all are younger than me. I'm about to be 41. But it's time for you all to demonstrate your power and say, not on my watch. No more coronavirus, no more mass incarceration, no more delaying in criminal justice reform. It is time to ensure that our voices are heard. So while many of you may be involved in the streets and planning activities around Black Lives Matter, around police reform, around ending police violence, it's also just as important that people are hearing from you at the ballot box. Voting is one very important way to ensure that change happens, and again, that your voices are heard. So as we sit today before you all on Zoom, just as the way of the world now is, as Adulting 101, you also have the opportunity to learn what it takes to influence others, not just on social media, but as it relates to shaping your agenda at the ballot box. Take out your phones and go to your favorite social media platform and post hashtag Adulting101. Take control of your citizenship, starting with your right to vote. You have to be the change that you so desperately seek. Each of you are leaders for positive change. You can do and continue to expand your leadership by encouraging your family members, encouraging your friends, and not just talking about it or just posting on social media. It's actually also taking the initiative to ensure that you're registered, to ensure that if you've been registered, you check your status, because there are some states that are purging voter rolls. You also have to ensure that you've requested your ballot and you know the folks who you need to vote for who most represent your interests. The most important thing as it relates to Black people's right to vote, of course, this year we're also celebrating the centennial of the 19th Amendment. Unfortunately, the women's right to vote in the suffrage movement, despite the fact that Black women and Black men were involved in the suffrage movement, the 19th Amendment did not apply to us. We all earned the right to vote, of course, with the fundamental labor of building this country. But it wasn't legal for all of us in every single part of this country until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That voting rights bill was reauthorized in Congress, ensuring that there's a section in the bill that made sure that every state that had pattern and practice of discriminatory behavior around voting, whether it's poll taxes, counting bubbles in the bars of soap, literacy tests, all of those things, they wanted to ensure that our rights were protected. Well, in 2014, there was a case in the Supreme Court called Shelby versus Holder. And what that case did is it virtually gutted all of the protections in Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. That's the thing. So that case from 2014 has not been addressed, meaning in that same case, the Supreme Court said, you know what, this as it stands can no longer apply. We think some changes need to be made. Guess what? They were wrong. But they said some changes needed to happen, and the only folks that can do that, based on how government is set up, is the legislature. So they gave Congress strict instructions to ensure that the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized. It hasn't been since 2014. So what does that mean? All of those states that used to have to submit plans in advance to the Department of Justice, it was called the pre-clearance process, to ensure that they were not discriminating in the voting process, they can do it now. And they will until, you all, we elect people who represent our interests, who think like us, who know what to do to ensure that our rights are protected. How many of us really want to go backwards? Not me. So let's not do that, especially as it relates to voting. And for those of us who have the privilege, we're 18 or older, we are in places where we are allowed to vote. There are some folks among us who have been disenfranchised because they may have committed a crime and it was a felony. And every state has not said that even after you've committed that crime and after you've, paid whatever retribution was associated with that, they still cannot vote, even if they're of age. We need to vote for them. We need to vote for the people who passed before us. We need to vote for the folks who haven't voted in a long time, and they need to be inspired to do so by watching you because you're the leader. These are the types of things that we need to do. Sometimes you got to give yourself your own pep talk. There's a gospel song that says, encourage yourself. Do that. But whatever you do, do not sit out this election. By virtue of the fact that you're here with us tonight, I believe that you are that leader. I believe you recognize that your power. And I believe you recognize the importance of your worth in ensuring the community understands our collective power and worth as well.
Yellow! I know the world won't give me nothing, so I gotta take it. And I know it's a way we can win. Why won't nobody say it? It don't matter where we from, suburbs or the slums. They don't wanna see us winning, they'd rather keep us down. Could have a war, but we don't know how. Don't let them tell you that your vote don't count.
First thing first, back in middle school when they taught us it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws, they just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislative branch. Yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years. But we don't never even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 2008, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, we just let them sit. See, they don't wanna tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the 3rd branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in, cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the US, we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the polls. My vote will count. Your vote will count. The time is now. Make sure y'all go vote.
It is, we could just about replace 9th grade civics and 10th grade world history with that video. And tonight he's kind enough to join us. And I want to ask Mr. Johannes, our communications director, if he would join me on screen too, if we can do that. And welcome YelloPain for a few questions. Young man from Dayton, Ohio. So found him on YouTube. He is quite a sensation now because he's breaking down this something that is very complex and making it simple enough for even for me to understand. And that's not always easy. Do we have any questions? I don't want to do the talking. I want to, YelloPain says he can't unmute. So Mr. Tech Factory, let's make sure that our star guest, our headliner tonight, can get in on this conversation. You know, as I think about Generation Y and Z, I heard Stacey Abrams talking about the power of Generation Y and Z. You know, this is the first generation of Americans that is mostly Black and brown, mostly non-white. If you're under the age of 18, you're likely not to be a person who is white, but you're likely to be a person of color. You are the most collaborative generations. You are the most multicultural generations. And I would submit that you're also the most committed generations because you go out week after week after week in those demonstrations. I'm too old, can't go. But I am grateful to you and I am reassured and inspired by you because I know the country is going to be okay because it's now your turn. One of the reasons we wanted to show the video of Lift Every Voice and Sing was that you see the continuum. And Brenda Anderson in the audience says, and they're the most tech savvy generation too. Of course they are. I wanted you to see that if you go all the way back to 1619, from 1619 to 2020, there's not been a break in the story. Our people have been struggling and striving, trying to make it in this country, building and growing and getting better and better. And you're a part of that continuum, and now it's your turn. The only thing we can do is help you fly. Is YelloPain with us? Are you on screen, sir? There he is, a genius. Now he needs audio. We got to give him a mic. Meanwhile, are there any, let's see, are there any cute questions? Can I see the questions or do you all have to give them to us?
All right, I'm here.
All right, there you are.
Hey, Jen, how you doing today?
What you working on next? That's what I want to know. What's next? You got to do one about, I mean, it's got to be something else cooking.
Man, there's a lot cooking. I got a project coming out soon called Yellow is the New Black. And, you know, it's just everything that comes from my heart. You know what I'm saying? I'm just putting out music. Whatever is touching my heart at the time, that's what's coming out.
I heard last time you were with us that you really wasn't really in the politics. You really didn't want to do this. You were really kind of skeptical about it. What were you like as a student in school, high school? Were you into like social studies, or clearly you got a good understanding of how the game works?
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't really an A student. I've been focused on music for so long. It's just like really, you know, locking into it. But I mean, I went to college for a year, you know what I'm saying? And to be honest, I really didn't have a whole lot of understanding about civics or anything like that. And I think that's why I'm the perfect person to speak on it. Because
you picked it up pretty quick though.
Yeah, it actually took a little while, but you know, I think somebody needs, you know, to speak on civics that comes from not believing in civics to feeling like the system doesn't work for them, because there's so many more people like me who feel like education has failed them. And you know, I'm one of those people. I felt like, you know, I voted for Obama back in 2012 and I felt like nothing changed. I was still broke. My community was still messed up. And I was like, you know, the system is broken. The system is broken. But at some point we have to realize, now that I know that we are the system, while living in a democracy, who makes the laws are the people that we do or do not vote for, you know? And now that I understand that, I have to make sure everybody else understands it as well.
Well, we got a young man who wants to ask you a question. His name is Raphael, and he is Mr. Cheney State University, Cheney University of Pennsylvania.
What's up, Raphael?
Can we get his question?
What's up?
You know, you
how are you?
There he is.
All right, how you doing, man?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm doing all right. What's up? What you got for me?
I'm sorry, I like lost it as soon as we got on stream.
Oh, it's all good.
What do you think is the most challenging part of voting as a young adult?
The actual process, or you mean like or learning about it?
Learning about it.
I definitely think it's a little bit difficult as far as the lingo. It's a lot of if you are not actively in civics or actively pursuing that type of education, that it's a lot of vocabulary that can go way over our heads. And I don't know if it's purposely set up that way or not, but that definitely has been difficult for me, even to this day, as I'm still learning. But I will say, understanding the importance is the most important part. Is once you understand that you need to know this stuff, that your vote and your voice really matters, then you'll take the extra steps to learn that lingo, and then do something that I did, like I did in the song, and that's simplify it. Once you go and learn that information for yourself, try to simplify it as much as you can for the other people who may not be as interested or maybe just as confused as you were at one point, and then you teach it to the rest of the people like you.
Thank you. You explained that perfectly.
Appreciate it.
We got another question. We got another student or young person or old person. We're not going to do ageism tonight.
Period.
Demia, we got a question from Demia.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. I am Demia Demings, and I am a junior majoring in mass media communications from the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio, and I have the humbling pleasure to serve as the 94th Miss Wilberforce University.
Period.
I feel like all is kind of personal because we're both from Dayton.
Period.
So,
okay. Hey, shout out.
But I would say my question is, what are some techniques that we could get to make our peers want to vote more? Because I understand, like, we're telling them, like, okay, make sure voting for this, 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 and that. But what do you think is like the number one that would help the youth kind of want to vote even more?
I think what helped me, the turning point that helped me, like, because my cousin Desiree Tim, she was telling me, like, you should make a song about voting. That's how I got into it. She was like, because young people are not interested. And I was so like, cuz I'm not trying to hear that. You feel me? I'm whatever. I don't care about the system, etc. But I think what it really was she asked me, what would you like to see change? What would you like to see different? And I think once you take away people's excuse not to vote, they have no reason. And a lot of things that people want to see changed, they don't know that stuff goes back to voting. So they feel like, it's just the president and he's going to just change the whole world. They don't understand that there's people that win by 4 and 5 votes. So to simplify that for you, like it's a point in the song where I said, imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we're going to fix the U.S., we got to start with them 2 letters. And those are all simple stuff. So you might be talking to somebody who, don't have custody of their kids and they fighting for custody of their kids. And the person that is, making that decision on them getting custody is somebody that they can vote for or cannot vote for. You get what I'm saying? So like bring it all the way back to what that individual person you're talking to, who that person is, and find out what they would like to see change. And then you explain voting in their personal interest, because at the end of the day, people don't want to vote because they feel like it's not in their personal interest. Tie it to that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great answer, and thank you for the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, I think we've got one of our board members from NCNW, Ms. Brenda Anderson, all the way from California, who has a comment she'd like to make. Brenda, can we unmute you? You were talking about all the years you spent with music. Don't you think music, or let me just ask the question straight up, doesn't music carry that message in a way that just talking to people can't?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Like, to be honest, like I knew at that point that the only way I would be able to really get the message across was through music. You know what I mean? Because people love music, and to be honest, music is what helps people get through everything. Like anytime somebody going through something, it's a song that helped them get through it. Or anytime it's a change in the world, or a protest, or riot, it's always music, some song or something that reflects that time period that drives people to do something or to not do something. And I'm glad that I was able to use music to an extent to help people get excited about voting.
Hi,
okay.
Janice.
Hey, Brenda, how are you this evening?
I'm
Thanks
doing
for
well.
joining in.
Thanks for allowing me to join in. I'm always excited when I see young people get energized. And I keep telling people we have to be more proactive instead of being reactive. And I got my start in college, community activism. But my question for YelloPain, or my comment is, and you actually hit on it just previously when you were talking about music. During the 50s and 60s, the music that came out of that era around the civil rights movement had messages in it. And I tell all the young people, go back, listen to the Curtis Mayfield and the Marvin Gaye and Edwin Starr that were talking about all the issues. And I see that in you now with this message you had. And I would love to see you do some other things around educating. Our kids learn kind of in a melodic kind of way, where they hear a song, it's in their mind, and then you start singing it. Back in the day, we had multiplication rock and grammar rock. Now we got YelloPain rock. And I would love to see you take that to the next level, do something on educating our young people about how a bill becomes a law, and how it starts on the ground level, on a local level, where someone says, you know what, why do we have this? We need to change this, and then start working with their elected officials and organizing and strategizing and pushing that agenda so that it becomes a bill, and from a bill, it becomes a law, to let everybody know it's not as hard as you think it is. Exactly. You know how to organize, and I see you doing that, and I would love to see you do one on a bill that becomes, how a bill becomes a law.
Like Schoolhouse Rock, kind of.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other questions? One of the reasons I like Lift Every Voice and Sing, because it walks you right through them whole 400 years of history. And when they put those pictures with it, and you start with them people getting lynched and beat, and you end with Barack Obama, I swear to God, it brings tears to my eyes every time I watch it. It doesn't do that to you yet, YelloPain, but your time is coming. What's going on by Marvin Gaye? I lived and breathed that all through college. That was what made us march and protest and get out and act the fool. And I'm glad I got somebody else to do it. Now I ain't got to do that no more. Got to do. Do we have any questions? Any other questions or comments before we close out the evening? Well, what we want to remind everybody, 97% of you say that you are registered and you plan to vote. That is wonderful. That means you got a responsibility to go out and tell somebody else. You got a responsibility to take your colleagues, your co-workers, if you're in the military, if you're working a job, if you're trying to go to college, if you're babysitting, if you're staying at home. Everybody can reach out and tell somebody, we're going to change this. Today, they arrested 13 fellas, say they're going to take over the government of Michigan, kidnap the governor of Michigan, and start a civil war. It is time for us to be organized. We've got a brilliant young woman who is the co-chair of our Youth and Young Adult Committee, who's going to come now and close us out with a few resource tips and some next steps. Miss Ariane Jamerson from New York City, New York.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Well, good evening to everyone. We are so glad you were able to join us tonight. It was empowering to see that 97% of you have already registered to vote. And so we're just going to go over this slide of some resources, as you may need to share this information with friends and family. So these are some resources that you can check out for yourself. You can go to turbovote.org. You can go to vote.org, 866rvote.org, factcheck.org, politifact.com, campusvoteproject.org, studentvoting.org. So all of these are resources that you can find out information on voting. So many of you are already registered to vote, but we want to double check that you have a plan in place. I know for myself today, I went and logged in for the state of New Jersey just to verify that I am indeed and still registered to vote. As we know, a lot of people have been registered to vote, but there could be some confusion. So you want to make sure that you know your voting status. I know for the state of New Jersey, the last day to register to vote is October 13th, and for New York is October 9th. So it's important to know that information so you can share it with friends and family as you are already registered to vote. But we want to make sure that everyone else around us is also registered to vote and can be in place to vote on November 3rd. So once again, we thank you for coming out tonight for Adulting 101. We want to thank our partners, Facebook, Cheyney University, Wilberforce University, the stream today with Roland Martin, and our presenters, Janelle Watson, Ashley Tucker, Kayla Allen, Angela Rye, and YelloPain. So once again, we thank you for joining us tonight. You can always find out more information about NCNW by going to ncnw.org. Thank you once again to our participants. This night wouldn't have been possible without you logging on and being with us this evening. Thank you.